They say lions never forget where they come from. But Christian, he remembered something deeper. Not a place, not a jungle, but a feeling. The feeling of love. The kind of love that crosses every border between man and beast. It all began in London, 1969, a city of noise, lights, and restless dreams. In the middle of it all, behind the glass of Harrods department store, lay a small cage. Inside that cage, under the buzz of neon signs, a golden cub with curious eyes watched the world rush by. He didn't belong there. You could see it in his eyes, a creature made for the wild, trapped in the heart of civilization. Two young men walked by that day, John Rendell and Anthony Ace Burke. They were ordinary friends, dreamers in a changing world. But when they looked into that cub's eyes, time slowed. It wasn't just pity, it was connection. The cub looked at them, not with fear, but with trust. And that trust was enough to change 3 lives forever. They bought him, not as a pet but as a promise to give him the life he deserved. They named him Christian. Christian wasn't raised behind bars or in some cold cage. He grew up surrounded by laughter, music, and warmth. He lived in their flat above a furniture shop on King's Road, Chelsea. Every morning he'd stretch his little paws and watch them with the wonder of a child. People passing by would stop and stare. A lion cub walking freely through London, wearing a soft leather collar, curious but gentle. He played with them like a brother. They rolled on the floor, chased each other through the shop, and sat together in the park as strangers gathered, smiling in disbelief. But beneath the joy there was a truth they both knew, but didn't speak. He was growing fast. One day those playful paws would be powerful enough to crush. Those gentle eyes would carry the weight of the wild. They loved him too much to cage him, and too much to lose him. That's the hardest kind of love there is. As months passed, Christian became magnificent. Tall, strong, with a mane that shimmered like sunlight through amber glass. Yet in his heart, he was still the same. Calm, loving, loyal. But they could feel it, the pull of nature calling him home. The world he belonged to wasn't built of concrete and cars. It was made of wind, grass, and the endless roar of freedom. So they made a decision that broke their hearts, to let him go. But how do you let go of something that's become a part of your soul? Through a chain of fate, they met 2 men who would change everything. Bill Travers and Virginia McKenna, stars of Born Free. They introduced them to George Adamson, a man who had spent his life rewilding lions in Kenya. George agreed to help, though he warned them this wouldn't be easy. Christian wasn't born in the wild. He'd have to learn everything from the start, how to hunt, survive, and fight for his place in a world far harsher than London's streets. The day of goodbye came quietly. The 3 of them sat together one last time in the park, the air heavy with silence. Christian rested his great head on their laps as if he knew. His eyes, those same golden eyes that once stared through the glass of Harrods, now looked at them with a strange understanding. Not sadness, not when they loaded him into the crate for his journey to Africa. John couldn't look away. He whispered, "Be free, my boy." Ace touched the wooden bars and said, "Don't forget us." The plane door closed, and with that sound their world shifted. Thousands of miles away, the air was different, hot, wild, alive. The grass moved like an ocean, and the sky stretched wider than imagination. Kenya was no cage. It was freedom painted in gold and dust. George Adamson and his team released Christian into a camp near the Kora Reserve, where he'd begin to learn what it meant to be a lion again. At first he was lost, uncertain, clumsy. The sounds of the wild startled him. The cry of hyenas at night, the echo of distant thunder, the rustle of unseen eyes watching. He missed the safety of his home, the laughter of his friends, the familiar hands that once scratched his mane. He would often sit alone, gazing at the horizon, as if wondering if they'd ever come back. But the wild doesn't wait. Days turned into weeks. He began to follow other lions, watching how they moved, how they hunted. His muscles grew stronger, his instincts sharper. The cub from the shop was fading. A king was being born. George would write in his journal about him, how intelligent Christian was, how quickly he learned, how fiercely loyal he remained to those who had shown him kindness. "He is different," George once said. "He carries both the heart of man and the soul of a lion." But still, John and Ace couldn't stop thinking about him. They'd lie awake at night back in London wondering, does he remember us? The world moved on, but their bond didn't fade. And deep in the African wild, neither did Christian's. A year passed, then another. London changed, the seasons turned, but in two hearts one memory stayed alive. The golden cub they once called family. John and Ace often sat together watching old photos of Christian. The memories still felt alive. His soft purr, the way he'd gently press his head against their shoulders, the laughter echoing through their small flat. But time had done its work. Christian was somewhere out there, not a pet anymore, not a cub, but a full-grown lion, wild and free. Yet the question burned deeper each day. Does he remember us? News from George Adamson came rarely, but each letter brought a mixture of hope and fear. "Christian has adjusted," one letter said. "He's formed a pride. He roams freely near Cora. He's healthy, strong, and wild." That last word, my wild, brought both joy and pain. It meant their dream had come true, but it also meant the Christian they knew might be gone forever. Then one night, under the warm glow of a London lamp, John turned to Ace and said quietly, "I have to see him again." Ace looked up, half smiling, half afraid. "What if he doesn't recognize us?" "Then we'll at least know," John replied. "But if he does, it'll mean everything." And so in the summer of 1971, they flew to Kenya. The moment they stepped off the plane, the air itself felt alive, thick with heat, scent, and sound. Africa had a pulse. You could feel it in your bones, something ancient and untamed. They met George Adamson again, his face weathered by sun and years, his eyes kind but cautious. He listened to their request and shook his head gently. "You must understand," he said. "Christian is no longer the cub you knew. He has a territory now, a pride. He's the head of it. If you go to him and he doesn't remember you, he might attack." John and Ace exchanged a glance. Their decision didn't waver. "We have to try," Ace said quietly. For days, George's team tried to locate Christian. The lion was elusive, spending most of his time deep in the bush. But then one morning, George came to their tent, his smile faint but real. "He was here last night," he said, "near the camp. We can try tomorrow." The next morning, the sun rose red and golden over the savannah. The air shimmered. The smell of dust and life filled everything. John and Ace waited at the edge of the camp, hearts pounding. George's voice came calm and low. "If he comes, don't move, don't call his name, let him come to you." Minutes felt like hours. The wind carried whispers of rustling grass, bird cries, and something heavier. Footsteps. From behind the tall grass, a shape appeared, broad, golden, majestic. A lion. For a moment, neither man breathed. Christian was no longer the cub they'd known. He was enormous, powerful, his mane full and wild, eyes sharp as flame. He looked at them from a distance, his gaze unreadable. "Is that him?" Ace whispered. George nodded. "Yes, that's Christian." The lion stood still, muscles tense. Then something strange happened. He tilted his head just slightly. His eyes softened. A long pause, then movement. Christian began to walk toward them, slowly at first, then faster. John felt his heart nearly stop. "Oh my God." The lion broke into a run, not the run of a hunter, but the run of a friend who's found what he's been searching for. Dust flew up as Christian charged forward, mane glinting in the sun. Before anyone could react, the lion leaped, not to attack, but to embrace. He stood on his hind legs, towering over John and Ace, wrapping his great paws around their shoulders, pressing his face against theirs. He remembered. He remembered everything. John's voice broke as he whispered, "Christian, it's you." Ace's eyes filled with tears, his hands trembling as he stroked the lion's mane. George watched silently, awe in his eyes. He'd seen lions his whole life, but never this. Never love like this. Christian rubbed his face against them, licking their cheeks, purring like a giant cat. He rolled on the ground at their feet, playfully pawing at their legs, just like he used to in London. The wild had not erased his heart. It had only deepened it. The moment lasted minutes but felt eternal. Around them, even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. The bond between man and beast had defied nature itself. When Christian finally lay down, he rested his head on Ace's lap. John whispered, "We did the right thing, we set him free." George smiled quietly. He's home, and yet he never forgot where he came from. For the next few days they stayed near the camp. Christian often appeared, leading his pride from a distance, sometimes approaching to sit with them in the golden light. He was a king now, and they were proud to have loved something wild enough to let go. When the time came to say goodbye again, it was gentler. Christian walked beside them for a while, brushing against their legs. Then he stopped, turned once, and disappeared into the tall grass. He didn't look back this time, and they didn't call after him. Because love doesn't always need to say goodbye. The world didn't believe it at first. Two men reunited with a lion in the wild, a lion who had once lived in a London flat. It sounded like a dream, something too pure for the real world. But it happened, and the world would soon see it with their own eyes. When John and Ace returned from Kenya, they carried something no photograph could truly hold: the memory of that embrace. They tried to describe it in interviews, but words always fell short. "It wasn't an attack," Ace would say softly. "It was recognition. He remembered our hearts." Months later, a small television clip of their reunion reached audiences across the globe. The footage showed Christian running, then leaping, wrapping his huge paws around them in that unbelievable hug. It spread faster than any story before it, before social media, before viral videos, carried by pure emotion. People wept watching it. Parents showed their children. Strangers wrote letters to John and Ace saying, "I didn't know animals could love like that." For the first time, the world began to see lions, and perhaps all animals, as more than symbols of power. They were beings with memory, emotion, and loyalty. The reunion became a mirror, reflecting something lost in humanity: our connection to the natural world. Christian had not just remembered his friends, he had reminded the world what it means to feel. But for John and Ace, fame was never the goal. They didn't chase interviews or documentaries. When asked how it felt to be part of something so historic, John simply said, "We were just lucky enough to love him." Still, the reunion transformed their lives. They began speaking for wildlife protection, for compassion over possession. They met students, conservationists, and dreamers who told them that Christian's story changed how they saw the world. In classrooms, teachers played the reunion clip to show children what empathy looked like. In Africa, conservationists used Christian's story to raise awareness for lions losing their homes to human greed. And across continents, people whispered his name as if it carried magic: Christian the lion. He became more than a lion. He became a symbol, but even symbols fade if forgotten. So John and Ace went back to Kenya a few years later, hoping just once more to see him again. George Adamson greeted them with a warm but knowing look. His voice carried the calm of a man who had spent his life between wilderness and wisdom. "I can't promise you'll find him," he said. "Christian's range is vast now, he's fully wild. But perhaps, if he remembers, he'll find you." They waited days. Each morning they'd walk to the same spot where they'd last seen him, the place where the tall golden grass met the horizon. The air was quiet, heavy with hope and doubt. One evening, as the sun melted into crimson over the hills, a lion's roar echoed from far away. Deep, powerful, familiar. They turned toward the sound, but he never appeared. George placed a hand on John's shoulder. "That was him," he said. "He's out there, still watching over his land." And that was enough. They didn't need to touch him again, didn't need another photo or moment on film. Just knowing he was alive, free, and thriving was everything they had ever wanted. That night, as they sat under the African stars, Ace whispered, "Do you think he knows how much he changed the world?" John smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I think he'd rather just be a lion." Somewhere out in the darkness, a roar answered, deep and distant, like a goodbye carried by the wind. Years passed. George continued his life's work, rewilding lions, fighting for balance between man and nature. John and Ace returned to London, but their hearts never truly left Africa. They often spoke at events, not about fame, but about faith. faith in the bond between species in the unspoken language of love. And the world never forgot Christian. His story spread through books, documentaries, and even music. Decades later, when the reunion clip resurfaced online, it ignited a new generation of hearts. Millions of people watched it again, crying as they saw that golden lion run and embrace the two men he once called family. In a world often divided by fear and greed, Christian's story stood as proof that love, real, selfless love, needs no words. It needs no explanation. Because love is memory, love is instinct, and in that brief moment in the African sun, a lion reminded the world that even the wildest heart remembers kindness. Christian eventually disappeared into legend. Some say he lived many proud years as a leader of his pride. Some say he was last seen near Kora, standing tall against the sunset. But no one truly knows. What they do know, and what the world will always know, is that a lion once remembered, and that memory became eternal. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest memories, but not this one. Even decades later, people still speak of a golden lion who remembered love, a creature who crossed the divide between wild and human, not through fear, but through faith. Christian's story lived on long after his paws stopped touching the earth. For John and Ace, it was never just about a lion. It was about what he taught them. The world knew the story of their reunion, but few understood the silence that followed. Because after the cameras stopped, after the applause faded, what remained was longing. They had touched something sacred, a connection so pure that even time couldn't take it away. John often said in interviews, "We didn't own Christian, we were part of his journey." That single line became his truth. Because love, true love, is never ownership. It's the courage to let go, to trust that freedom is the purest form of care. Years rolled on, and life carried both men in different directions. Yet whenever they spoke of him, their eyes softened, their voices slowed, as if he were still just around the corner, ready to nuzzle their hands like before. And maybe in a way he was, because legends don't end and they echo. Somewhere in the dry wind of Kenya, among the whispering grass and rustling leaves, people said they could still hear his roar. Not a sound of power, but of memory, of home. George Adamson continued his life's mission, protecting lions until his final days. He often said, "Christian proved that love can cross even the wildest borders." Those words became a guiding light for generations of conservationists. And when George passed away, the news spread across the same lands where Christian once roamed. Many said that at sunset that evening, the air felt different, the wind heavier, the silence more profound. As though somewhere, a lion bowed his head in respect. As for Christian, no one knows when his final day came. There was no cage, no ending marked by sorrow, only freedom, only sky. Perhaps he lived many more years, surrounded by his pride, ruling the land he was meant to rule. Perhaps one night, he looked up at the stars and remembered two faces from long ago, faces that smiled at him through glass, then set him free. But maybe that's the beauty of it, that we don't need to know how it ended, because what matters most is what he left behind. His story became more than history. It became a lesson whispered across time, that love is not limited to words, species, or borders. It is something ancient, something pure, something we all carry within us, waiting to be remembered. When people watch the reunion video even today, the moment he runs, leaps, and embraces, something stirs inside them. Some cry, some smile, some simply stare in silence. Because deep down we all recognize what we're seeing. It's not just a lion greeting his friends. It's love remembering itself. That's why Christian's story endures, not because it was rare, but because it was real. It reminds us that kindness never vanishes, that what we give in love, freely without chains, always finds its way back, even if years have passed, even if oceans lie between. Christian taught us that the wild is not something to fear, but something to respect. That true strength is gentle, that true freedom is shared. And somewhere in that vast African savannah where golden grass waves under an endless sky, maybe, just maybe, his spirit still walks. A lion who once lived among men, who learned their laughter, who taught them humility, A lion who proved that the heart remembers long after the world forgets. And if you stand there at dusk when the wind softens and the horizon glows red, you might feel it. The whisper of paws in the dust. The echo of a purr that once melted fear into friendship. A reminder that love, once real, never dies. Because Christian was never just a lion. He was a bridge between two worlds that had forgotten they were one. And in that brief, timeless moment when he ran toward his friends with all the joy of the wild and all the warmth of home, the world saw something divine. A truth older than language. A heartbeat older than man. A story that will live forever. Of a lion who remembered love,